It looks as if the Smiths' new LP, Strange Ways Here We Come, will be their last. Just before its release, songwriter and guitarist Johnny Marr quit the group, and singer Morrissey has dramatic new plans too. More of those later. First, here's Morrissey on how his attitude to the Smiths' career changed over the years.
I think I've become a little bit slightly negative about the music industry, whereas perhaps 5 years ago, entering it, I felt very idealistic, that lots of things could be changed and everything could be, lots of people could be erased from the whole thing. And it isn't necessarily true, really, I find. So I've become a little bit sceptical, even more so than usual.
But you're doing interviews such as this, and you're changing record companies and things like that. I thought perhaps it worked the other way around, that you're becoming reconciled to having to do all those things.
Not really. I still have faith in the records themselves. So there are really separate worlds within this great big balloon, really. But generally, and even with interviews, I don't really do that many, but I think occasionally some should be done, really. I don't think total silence is very useful. But generally, the whole rhythm of the music industry, I don't really tend to understand anymore.
Michael Jackson and people like that?
Well, I think they're really very special cases. I think they're very special cases. I think now they can afford to be quite silent because they have such a tremendous publicity machine. But I find generally that if, for instance, if I don't do that many interviews, the Smiths practically have no public profile whatsoever, because we're very rarely on English television and we're very rarely on daytime radio. So therefore, if there aren't interviews, we tend to really not really be anywhere, which is...
It might not be on the Prince or Michael Jackson scale of things, but you've been pretty well mythologised yourself, haven't you? Do you feel the need to dissipate that and actually be seen as a sort of smiling human being?
I've never felt that need. Not really. I've never felt that need. I've never belonged to the throng of the club sect or whatever. And even though I've been in London for a long time, I've never really been a part of any great clannish group of either club people or music industry people. I've kept quite insular.
Why?
It just happened that way, really. It was quite necessary. It was quite a sense of protection, really, because I didn't want to lose a particular vision I had of what I felt I needed to do. And I think it's so easy to do that if you become like a very busy socialite, and you're seen everywhere, and you do everything, and you know everybody. It distills something.
It's been played, 3 songs that are going to be on your next LP. I wondered if you could talk to me a little bit about a couple of those. Paint a Vulgar Picture.
Which is really, I expect, touches upon what we've just mentioned about the music industry and the rather, the very sour elements of it. Which Paint a Vulgar Picture is about how the death of a pop star is treated generally by record companies, and how they tend to become very, they tend to utilise the death and exploit the person. And I find that really sad. It's never really done in a very touching and a very passionate way. It's always very gaudy, very cheap, very nasty, tending to really milk the whole situation. And also people, I think audiences generally tend to, when a person dies, it throws a different coloration on that person's career. And we tend to generally appreciate people a little bit more. Obviously, we're quite sad because they've died, but so there's several angles. We tend to be a little bit, audiences I think generally tend to be a little bit applauding, a bit generous, and record companies, I find, tend to be a little bit vicious.
Does this, or do the lyrics of the song apply to any particular hero of yours?
Well, not really directly. There have been some. There have been people I have liked immensely who have died, such as Mark Bolan, and others. But really, I think it's generally quite common. It's a very common occurrence that when somebody dies, there's this awful, awful, nauseating scrambling to squeeze the legend, really.
In the song, there's the memory of a fan's one encounter with that hero. Is that you?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. When I was much younger, I used to go to sound checks and hang around concert halls and try to meet people at, midday, things like that. So yes, that memory is there for me, really. When I met certain people, it was very, very important to me. It was a lasting memory.
Girlfriend in a coma, I know, it's serious.
What are your obsessions these days?
Well, unfortunately, I think they're as they always were, which is just books, records, films, all the things that I was very passionate about a decade ago are still quite strong, which is something that's quite surprised me, I expect, but I still get very obsessive about. I'm still quite principally a fan.
So you spend all your time when you're not working, what, going to see films, sitting at home reading books?
Yes, I do. I don't go to see films. I watch them at home. I don't go out.
Why not? Is it a pain in the neck being recognised and things like that?
Well, I wouldn't say pain in the neck. It's sometimes quite difficult. I tend to be recognised more than I actually expect to be recognised. I often I don't really feel like a huge media face that one would instantly recognise, but I'm constantly recognised wherever I go, even by middle-aged taxi drivers, which certainly surprises me, because obviously I'm not on that. I'm not, for instance, a Boy George figure, whom everyone knows, regardless of whether one is interested in pop music or not. But I do get surprised at the number of times that I'm stopped, which is quite constantly.
How do you react?
It's confusing because it really depends how one is approached. And if one is approached very nervously, then I tend to be nervous. And if people tend to be aggressive, then I tend to be aggressive. So it's something that really I just pick up from the person who approaches me.
Would you rather they didn't do it at all?
Well,
not to be horrible or dismissive of your fans, but would you rather not deal with it?
Well, it's generally quite a clumsy thing. It's very clumsy, and that's quite painful sometimes. But I wouldn't say that I would rather it not happen.
Well, no, of course not, because you did it yourself, didn't you?
Well, of course, yes, I did. But I don't think that. I wish there was a very easy way to deal with it, but there isn't really.
Are you interested in any causes that might require you to, make a stand in public as a pop star? I don't know, anti-nukes, party politics, things like that. I mean, apart from the vegetarian thing, which is well known.
Right, but it's, to me, the most important. So that's really the only thing that I feel extremely, extremely guilty and embarrassed at the fact that I don't go out every day and take part in some extraneous activity or quite violent and strong activity.
Not like belonging to the Animal Liberation Front or something like that.
Yes, exactly. I do feel extremely guilty. But otherwise, I don't really think there's anything that I particularly feel terribly moved about. The nuclear situation is just, the anti-nuclear situation rather, is just so awful and so beyond people's control that there's not really a great deal that people can do.
Oh, surely popular opinion has some bearing on these things.
Well, apparently not. It doesn't seem to. People generally protest and receive no media coverage whatsoever. So I don't know. I think rather than a peaceful protest, it will take something very violent and very strong in order to state people's rejection of nuclear weapons. I think there's no point, any peaceful protesters, there's just no point. There's no point giving speeches or even marching, things like that. It's nebulous now. Stronger action is needed, I think.
You feel the same way about South Africa and things like that? Is that something where world opinion can make a difference?
Well, I don't really have an answer for that. I'm very confused about that. Next question.
How you regard other people in your line of work, because your attitude has always seemed to be sort of not of the process. Therefore, what do you think when you look at somebody like, say, George Michael, who's sort of done it all the very conventional way and has actually, you know, reached the pinnacle or whatever? I mean, do you feel a lurking admiration or contempt or something in between?
Well, it's quite difficult because I don't really meet that many pop stars, but when I do, I generally find that they're very nice. And even though I could be very overtly critical about what they do and why they do it, I expect that, and I feel that people just simply do what they can, and they do it in the way that in the only way that they can, and everybody has their own different rules, really. Most of it I don't really approve of, but if that's how they want to do it, then so be it, really. But generally, the usual guided path throughout popular music is not really one that I've ever felt I could conceivably take and really be successful. Like, I don't really believe that I could be a successful pop star in the George Michael sense. I don't really think I could do that very well. So, but some of them are very nice people.
Why couldn't you do it? Is it a question of self-belief? Or...
Yes, I mean, it's that completely. It really is that completely. Sometimes I find it very hard to appear on pop shows and things like that, and in very simplistic pop magazines. I don't really feel that it's my place somehow. I don't really belong there.
Well, that might be interpreted as being a bit snooty. I mean, do you think you're above it?
Well, no. Well, yes. I mean, I'm certainly above it. I mean, intellectually, I'm definitely above it. But it's not really. It's not because of snooty reasons. It's just not my patch. It's not really where I feel that I have anything to contribute, really.
Do you get self-conscious about things like that?
Well, extremely self-conscious, yes. I mean, when I've been on television and I look awful and I see it later, you know, it haunts me for months and months and months.
So do you ever, in the course of your work, because I mean you do some of these TV things and stuff like that, as you say, you do run into other musicians. I mean, can you think of an instance of anybody you've ever run across who you actually thought, this is somebody I might have something in common with and I would like to get to know?
Well, I'm very good friends with Pete Burns, and I'm good friends with Lloyd Cole. So they're two people, I think, who are obviously quite extreme characters. There's not really anybody else, I don't think. There are certain people I know, and it's been quite nice, and we've exchanged letters occasionally, but I don't see them religiously, you know, day in, day out. But Pete Burns I see quite a lot.
What's your home like?
I have a flat in Chelsea, which is very dark. It's in quite a big old Victorian house, and the flat is at the back, and it's very dark, and it has no natural daylight. So I live.
Is that why you chose it?
Yes, I mean that was the deciding factor. That swayed me completely. So it's very closed. It's very away from the world. Nobody can get to me, and if there was a fire, I would probably die. So it's a very insular little private borough, really. That's how I live. I suppose you live in a modern masonette, do you?
Pretty much like that, yes. Is it full of knickknacks and souvenirs and pictures and things?
It's full of books, yes, and pictures and records, things like that. Typical things and old furniture. It's a very musty place.
I'd heard that one of your former abodes was decorated with lots of framed photos of yourself and of James Dean.
Yes, yes.
Have you taken them with you?
What?
Have you taken them with you? Are they all in this?
Oh yes, yes, and even I have even more now. Yes. So they're all around the walls.
You still maintain your interest in him?
Yes, it's waned a bit, it's wilted a little bit, but it's still there, definitely. I still collect things when I see them, quite rare books and so on.
As what? As an icon or something? Or were you interested in the man and what he was like?
I think I was slightly more interested in him as a symbolist rather than as an actor. I quite liked the films, but I was never dramatically obsessive about the plots. But I think as a symbolist, James Dean, I find very interesting thing, very interesting subject.
Did you have some sort of game plan worked out? I mean, when you started being in a group of, you know, the process? I mean, did you take it on quite on that sort of level rather than just being in a group and getting on down? Was
Yes,
it all worked out about image? And
yeah,
things
well,
like
yes, it was. I mean, it was never principally designed for, if you like, fun or recreation. It did have a very critical, planned edge to it. It was very important that certain things happened in the way that they did, and certain things unravelled themselves in a very particular way. It wasn't just a matter of, as I say, fun or things like that. Heaven forbid.
Well, so to what extent do you exaggerate yourself then?
Well, none extent whatsoever. It tends to happen. I think it tends to happen with a lot of people. I think if you meet a lot of people who make records, they're really quite uncomplicated souls. So I think generally certain things about me tend to expand beyond human proportion and get slightly overblown, but it's not really something I engineer.
You're rather fortunate then, aren't you? That, I mean, you're in a position where you can afford to indulge your desire to, you know, live in a dark flat, read books and watch films and things like that. I mean, had the Smiths not been so successful, would you have had to go out and get a job?
Well, obviously, previously to the Smiths, I was in the situation where I would have to work if I wanted to survive in a faintly acceptable way, but I didn't work. I didn't work for years and years and years. So I never really felt that I could work, which might sound quite silly, but I never felt that I could really take a job. I blatantly refused to work and just to do somebody else's chores, because that's the way I saw it. I saw it as something that was nothing to do with me. It was just merely doing some other individual's work. And I couldn't really come to terms with that. So I did live in a very semi-poverty state. But it seemed to be the only way that I could really survive. Because I couldn't even take a job for now, temporarily, because I find that so many people are in jobs that they had taken temporarily and they're now, you know, in their late 70s and they're still in that job. So I couldn't really do that. I couldn't go out and do anything.
To be somebody that a certain type of audience can identify with very strongly and very readily. Now, I don't know how to put this charitably, but I mean, what's known as perhaps, you know, the Long Mac Brigade,
yes,
or whatever.
I think that was true initially. I think that was true in perhaps 1983, but it has expanded, and other elements of society, if you like, do listen and like the Smiths. So it really isn't as rigid as it once was. It's really quite a broad thing now. But initially, yes, I felt that the following was a very overtly serious, private crew of people.
What do you feel about your audience? I mean, do you feel some great bond?
Yes, I do. I feel a tremendous bond, a great bond with them. And obviously playing live is the time when one comes face to face, and it's a very touching thing, very touching thing. No, I don't like touring. Performing on a stage is quite different. That is quite separate, and that's really quite a priceless thing.
What do you feel like when you're performing on stage?
It's,
Don't you have that self-consciousness then?
No, I just have self-consciousness when I come off stage. But when I'm on stage, I don't, something happens to me, and I don't really feel self-conscious at all. It seems a very natural thing to be there, and to sing, and to...
Be adored?
Well, no, I'd never say that. I don't really feel that's why I'm there. But it is really like communication. It's reaching out to people and having them reach to you and so on. But I don't like the process of touring, of being, you know, shuttled about and thrown about and having to find food and scavenge and things like that. Especially hotels don't really cater for people who don't eat animals, and so that's always a very big problem. So that aspect of it I really hate. And obviously one has to be really early and you have to travel dramatic distances, and by the time you get to the venue you just look old and horrible and your voice has gone. But nonetheless, the spiritual thing of being on a stage and seeing people and so on is quite uplifting.
The state of the Smiths at the moment?
The state of the Smiths, in what sense? What, as individuals or
well, no, as a collective,
career?
really, I suppose.
Really?
I mean, is it you and the band? There appears to be
No, it
a
isn't.
distinct difference.
No, it isn't. I think things have always been the same, really, in the sense that I have quite largely always done interviews. And for some reason, I was always the person who was pictured in magazines, etc. I think that happens quite a lot, though, that the person who sings is the person who is photographed and so on. So, no, it's really as it ever was, which is a very collective thing, and a very strong collective thing. It has to be that way, otherwise I don't really believe the records would be quite so solid and quite so compact.
Doesn't it make any difference, though, that they don't necessarily share your, how would you put it, notions of spiritual or sexual or whatever purity?
What, does it
like
make
that?
a difference?
Doesn't it compromise? I mean, all right, to put it baldly, I mean, if you as the figurehead of the group are in interviews talking about anything from vegetarianism to celibacy to anti-drugs or whatever, and the rest of the group don't appear to subscribe to that view, well, that's fine, but doesn't it make you look a bit of a hypocrite?
Well, not really, because quite generally people ask me my personal viewpoint, and I really have to answer that, obviously in a personal way, and I want to. They are all vegetarian, but I've never felt hypocritical in the least. I've never felt that I've given an answer that will simply make everybody happy. I've always given answers that are absolutely truthful and are absolutely mine. I don't feel that I speak for, I must condense my viewpoint into one that will just keep everybody quite contented.
Are you really chummy with the rest of the group? I mean, do you hang around together outside of work, or do you have other friends that you socialise with?
The Smiths never socialise at all. We're very quite quiet people in the sense that we're generally in our homes every night. So I don't socialise with anybody, really. So we don't get together every night.
You must have friends.
Well, I have one or two that I see occasionally, perhaps once a week. But I don't run around in a pack or anything like that.
Since his songwriting partner Johnny Marr left the Smiths, Morrissey has decided to pursue a solo career. He won't be entirely alone, however. Smiths producer Stephen Street will be collaborating with him. As for Johnny Marr, rumour has it that he's enlisting with the Pretenders.
coma